Coming up today, it's episode 92 of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. We go back to 1984. Not just a time when Prince's Purple Rain was the #1 album on the Billboard charts. It was also a time when the Detroit Tigers were World Series champions. The catcher from that team, All-Star Lance Parrish, joins us today to share his memories and his journey from California to Detroit. Tells us about his nickname, who he got it from, and also about a side job he had back in the late 1970s as a bodyguard for Tina Turner. He also tells us about that 1984 team and what he wrote about it in the Enchanted season, a book out now from Triumph Books. Our guest, episode 92 of In the Front Row, is Lance Parrish. Lance, certainly appreciate your time here today, and going to talk plenty about 1984, the World Series, and the book that's out now, the Enchanted season, that you co-wrote with Tom Gage from Triumph Books. Certainly want to dive into that, but let's go back to the beginning for you. And before that, you're a guy that's, you're born in Pennsylvania. Early on, though, age 6, you moved to California. So do you consider yourself more a California guy than a PA guy?
Well, yes. I grew up out in Southern California. In fact, every time I reference Pennsylvania, that's where I was born, that's where my parents are from, everybody starts dropping names of cities and, locations. I go, hey, I left there on my 6th birthday, and I don't remember too much about the whole place. So, we've been back periodically to visit family, but, I'm not very familiar with the whole area. So, I do consider myself more of a California guy than obviously Pennsylvania.
Well, tell us about your sports in California. It looked like you were a 3-sport athlete in high school. What's going through your mind at that time as far as what you thought you were excelling the most at during that time?
Well, to be honest with you, I just tried to keep myself busy. And I'm sure my parents were happy that I was, more involved in athletics than out, causing trouble anywhere. So I played football, basketball, and baseball. I just jumped from one sport to the other all the way through high school. And in junior high, basically the same thing. I had an opportunity coming out of high school to play football. I had a few scholarship offers. I went on recruiting trips to USC, UCLA, Cal Berkeley, Nebraska, Arizona State. I chose UCLA just because I fell in love with the campus, the people there. Dick Vermeil was the head football coach. Gary Adams, who ended up being the head baseball coach there for a number of years, was just coming over that particular year from UC Irvine out in Southern California. So he was making that transition. And, so I was really excited about the opportunity. I think in hindsight, it might have been a better opportunity for me if I'd have went to USC, since they seemingly won everything every year after that. So, John McKay was the head football coach there. And obviously, those that follow college baseball, Rod Dato was still in USC's program at the helm of the baseball. So, great options. But, I chose UCLA. I was looking forward to, that opportunity. And then all of a sudden, the Detroit Tigers came knocking. I was drafted in the first round in the June draft in 1974. And I'll be honest with you, I was a little bit surprised. I was pretty naive to the whole process. Back then, it wasn't anything like it is now, as far as, guys being able to jump online and find out who's looking at you and what's going on. I had people in my ear telling me, you're going to be a #1 draft pick and you need to ask for this and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, okay, well, we'll see how that works out. But the Tigers ended up drafting me. I actually had gone to a workout at Anaheim Stadium where the Angels played just a few weeks before the draft. And I thought I did everything I could possibly do to impress them. I hit the ball very well in batting practice, hit a bunch of balls out of the ballpark. I threw from behind the plate. I threw from the outfield. Everything they wanted me to do, I did. And I do recall one of the last things I did do was one of the guys that was running the workout said to me when I was behind the plate, if you can throw this ball down to second base in under 2 seconds, he goes, you can pretty much throw anybody out in major leagues. Well, I consistently threw the ball down to second under 2. In fact, I was right around 1.9 the whole time. So I thought, okay, I just sealed the deal right there. And Anaheim Stadium was right in my backyard. So I was thinking, well, this would be so awesome if I got drafted by the Angels. Well, come draft day, I'm at school, and I was in one of my classes, and our head baseball coach came and knocked on the door, peeked his head in there, and asked our teacher, if he could talk to me out in the hallway. So I went out there with him, and he said, he gave me a big smile, and then he shook my hand. He goes, "Congratulations." He goes, "You are the number 1 pick of the Detroit Tigers." And I was like, Detroit Tigers? I didn't know anything about the Detroit Tigers, to be honest with you. And had no idea, again, who they were, where they were at. I didn't barely know where Detroit was. And then I remember leaving my class. It was the last class of the day, going down to the athletic building, and all of our coaches were down there. And I remember our head football coach, who was also the athletic director, after everybody was there talking to me, he goes, "So what do you think about the opportunity to play for Ralph Houck?" And I was just like, "Who's Ralph Houck?" I didn't even know who Ralph Houck was. So, needless to say, I wasn't, very much in the know about a lot of things, but as things turned out, I ended up signing with them, and, the rest is history. So.
Yeah, probably a little mixed emotions there. You wanted to stay on the West Coast, close to home, but certainly, all things played out well in your favor. But, you're 17 years old, going to minor league baseball, playing there for several years. What was that journey like for you to go through the minors back in the 70s?
Well, it was definitely a little bit different than it is nowadays. Everything is so much better now, from the facilities all the way up to the coaches, the specialty, not so much the knowledge of the coaches. It's just the abundance of them. There's coaches for everything. And there's more than one for, any one given thing that's going on the field. So I started out in rookie ball. I flew from Southern California right after my 18th birthday, to be honest with you. In fact, my birthday's tomorrow, to be honest with you. I flew from Los Angeles to Tampa on a red eye so that I could go to extended spring training right after I signed my contract. And it was the first time that I had ever left home before, the first time I'd ever been away from my family. So it was kind of a shocker, to be honest with you. I was a little nervous, and arrived in Tampa. They gave me instructions to get on a particular shuttle, take it to Lakeland, where our spring training was, check into the team dormitory, which was named Fetzer. It's still named Fetzer Hall to this day. And that's exactly what I did. I checked in. I was absolutely fried. I didn't sleep the entire night. So when I got in there, I was, once I got into my room, I just dropped my bags, and it was like I hit the wall. I just was like, I got to close my eyes for a while. So I jumped in bed, and the next thing I know, the door to my room flies open, and it's our farm director, Hoot Evers. And he's yelling at me, "What are you doing in bed? They're expecting you over at the field, and you got to go get fitted for a uniform," and blah, blah, blah. So, he lit me up right out of the gate, and I hustled down to the locker room and got fitted for a uni, and I was out there working out for, a couple hours. And the one thing I do remember is they gave me a team-issued sleeve to wear under my uniform that was made out of wool, and it was like 100 degrees with 100% humidity down in Florida. So I about melted before the day was over. But that was my intro. And then I went to after our abbreviated extended spring, I went to Bristol, Virginia, which was our rookie ball club in the Appalachian League, and we kicked butt that year. We ended up winning the whole thing. We played, as people will probably look into it, we played a 70-game schedule. We had one game rained out. We never made up. So we ended up playing 69 games. We were 52-17 on the year. So we just, in that year, Mark Fidrich was on the team, the Bird. And, even though I signed as a third baseman, which a lot of people don't realize, and they converted me to catcher after that particular season. And not only did they convert me to catcher, after my rookie season, but they told me they wanted me to switch hit. So, that was a big mystery to me. I'd never switch hit in my life before. And I went to A-ball the next year, back to Lakeland, and I switch hit the entire season. But the one thing that I love to point out, in reference to what I was talking about all the coaches they have available now, my two coaches that I had on my A-ball team in 1975 was our manager was a guy by the name of Stubby Overmeyer, who was like a 5'8" left-handed pitcher and didn't know a whole lot about hitting. And the other coach that we had was a pitching coach, Mike Dwyer. And he didn't know a whole lot about hitting. So they converted me to a switch hitter after I just turned 18. And it was like, you're on your own, figure it out. I didn't have any hitting coach there to work with me or tell me you're doing this right or this wrong. So needless to say, the reason that they did that, real quickly, Hoot Evers, our farm director, once again, was the guy that told me they wanted me to switch hit. And he said, if you ever get the hang of this with that short porch in right field in Detroit, there's no telling how many home runs you'll hit. And I go, but I've never switch hit before. So I went the entire season in Lakeland, and I never hit one home run left-handed. And I hardly ever even pulled the ball. It was just trying to make contact and hit the ball the other way most of the time. But, I started finally getting the hang of it towards the end of the year. And when the season was over, they pulled the plug on it and said, you're not switch hitting anymore. So it was like, wow. So I, went through the difference to every year they moved me up, even though my first 3 years I didn't hit very well at all. I was either right around 220 or below. So if I was playing, I've always made the reference, if I was playing in today's world in baseball, I'd have probably never got out of A-ball.
Yeah.
But they had a program in Detroit back then where they just pushed guys, Okay, you didn't do very well. I'm sure it had a lot to do with the fact that I was the number one draft pick, but they just kept pushing me. So every year I moved up, and it wasn't until I got to AAA that I finally broke out and had a pretty good year. And then after that season was over, I was a September call-up to Detroit, and then I stayed up there from that point on.
Yeah, 1977. I want to go back before the call-up.
Okay.
Is it myth or is it truth that you were a bodyguard for Tina Turner briefly before your call-up in 1977?
Yeah, well, I was, but I wasn't. There's a story behind that, obviously. When I was living out in Southern California, and it was actually right around that time. I don't remember the exact year, but I do remember that I was in our major league clubhouse. So it very well could have been after I was, maybe in the big leagues during my first year or whatever. But when we were in spring training, I made the mistake of mentioning that to a couple guys, and then word got out. But I had a guy that was representing me out in Southern California, who also, rubbed elbows with, the Hollywood crowd and all that. So he calls me one afternoon during the off season and said, what are you doing? And I said, I'm not doing anything. And he goes, well, how would you like to do something? And I get like, for instance, and he said, well, how would you like to be the bodyguard for Tina Turner? And I'm like, bodyguard for Tina Turner? I go, are you serious? I go, I've never done that before. And I said, well, is that really a safe thing to do? And he goes, well, here's the deal. He goes, it's pretty simple. He said, she's actually down in Burbank Studios right now, filming the show. I don't know if everybody remembers the Hollywood Squares. Mm-hmm. Okay. And she was going through a divorce with her husband, Ike, at the time, which, I didn't really follow very closely, but, he laid that on me. And all she's looking for is a guy to walk with her from her dressing room to the set, because they're going to film a couple shows during the course of the day. And he goes, and it would be something for you to do. And I go, well, what if Ike shows up? What if he shows up with a gun or, something crazy? Oh, that's not going to happen. I go, yeah, famous last words. That's not going to happen. So, he talked me into it, and he goes, it'd be fun. Just go down and, you get to meet some people and, get out of the house for a while. So I agreed to do it. So literally I did it for one day. And I went down to the studio and I met her, and she was extremely nice. And all I did was, like I said, I walked with her from her dressing room. I stood outside her door until she was ready to go, walked her over to the set with her, and then I just stood there and watched the taping of the show. It was kind of a kick. I got to meet some of the other stars that were there. And then when it was all said and done, I jumped in the car and went home. But when I went to spring training, we were sitting around talking, and I don't know if there was a reporter that was nearby within earshot, but I had mentioned that, hey, you'll never guess what I did during the off season. And I'll be honest with you, once that got out, every city I went to, when reporters would come over, that I thought they wanted to talk to me about the game, the first question they asked me was, hey, tell us about being a bodyguard for Tina Turner. So it was like I spent the whole season trying to play that down, because it wasn't like I went on tour with her or any of that. It was just the one-time deal. And so that's the story behind the Tina Turner thing.
Well, that's like a blooper, later on becomes a line drive to the wall.
Exactly.
You're one day, you were a roadie for her all her career, but great footnote, great Forrest Gump moment for you with Tina Turner. So again, you make your major league debut with the Tigers in 1977. Do you remember that debut and who that was against and what happened during that first game, and your second game really that you played was certainly a memorable one for you?
Yeah. Well, my first game was against the Baltimore Orioles, and my first game I didn't do much. I know my first time up I grounded out to second base, and then my second time up I lined out to center field. And then I either got taken out of the game or I walked or whatever. I only had 2 official at bats, but I caught that game and that was great. It was my initiation into the big leagues. And I didn't play all that bad. I just didn't get any hits. My parents were in town to watch the game, so that was kind of exciting. But the next game was the game that I finally got my first hit, and actually I had a pretty good game. I ended up getting 3 hits. And I think I scored 4 runs and drove in 4 runs. I hit my first home run. But it was my first major league hit that was actually the thing that stood out in my mind, and not for any positive reason. My first major league hit, I think it was off of, gosh, now I can't even remember. It was either Ed Farmer. It was one of the other, Earl Stevenson or Ed Farmer, one of the other one, because I got my first hit off of one and my first home run off of the other. But I remember my very first hit, he jammed me. I mean, badly. I mean, it just missed my hands, to be honest with you. And it was a line drive, in slow motion line drive. There was not a whole lot of exit velocity to it. And it went right over the top of his head, the pitcher. And he jumped up and tried to catch it. And honestly, when I'm watching this, it was like it was happening in slow motion. It was just, I hit the ball so softly. He jumped up and tried to catch it, and it just went over the top of his glove and landed right between the pitcher's mound and second base in the grass. Well, I, took off, and before the second baseman or the shortstop could get to it or the pitcher could turn around and get to it, I beat it out. So that was my first major league hit. And, they always have, it's, traditional that they stop the game and they throw the ball out of the game so that I could keep it as a souvenir, my first major league hit. Well, I was a little embarrassed by it all. It's like a lot of guys, hit a ball in the gap or smoke a ball or hit a home run or whatever. Here I had this, slow motion line drive that landed. It was like a lob wedge shot in between the pitcher's mound and second. So anyway, I'm on base. The inning gets over. I come into the dugout, and they've got my ball in the dugout. Well, when I walked in, I was getting ready to put my gear back on, and somebody walked over and handed me the ball. Here's your first major league hit, and it had Band-Aids all over it. So I thought that was pretty clever, and I got a little chuckle out of that. But that game was pretty amazing, and I'll be honest with you, I was pumped that my folks were in the stands to be able to watch that, and it was. And I think the last time I got up, to be perfectly honest with you, because I had gone 3 for 3 leading up to that, and the last time I got up, everybody gave me a standing ovation when I came to the plate. So I was like, all right.
Yes, September 7th, 1977. A nice memory there. So, hey, that's an accomplishment, though, as a catcher. to get an infield hit as your first hit. I mean, that's,
Yeah.
that's kind of something to talk about too.
Well,
right?
that's back when I could fly. So.
Do you have your home run ball too? Your first home run?
Well, I do. They're packed away in a box somewhere. Haven't really. My wife and I moved about 5 years ago back here to Michigan, and I've still got a lot of my stuff in boxes. I need to weed through that, but I've got it.
So let's fast forward to 1982. You become the starting catcher, the regular catcher on that Tigers team. Sparky Anderson during that season takes over as the manager. Is that when things start to really come together and start to point toward what would become 1984 and the World Series championship for you guys?
Well, I mean, that was the beginning of it all. Obviously, Sparky was brought over for a reason. Our whole organization, the Major League team in particular, was right in the middle of a transition period. As everybody will recall that followed the Tigers, the Tigers won the World Series championship in 1968. And, it had been a while since, they had accomplished anything after that. A lot of those guys, there were still guys that were a part of our team when I came up in 77 and into the early 80s. But, I think Mickey Stanley was on there. John Hiller was on the team, both members of the 68 World Championship team. But, they were going through the process of bringing in a new nucleus of players. And I think Sparky's job was to put that team together and turn it into a championship caliber club. I was very disappointed, to be quite honest with you, when they hired Sparky, because the guy that was instrumental in my development in the minor leagues, was a guy by the name of Les Moss. Les Moss was my manager in AA. He was my manager in AAA. And he was actually the manager before Sparky got there. He was fired so that Sparky could come in. And it was just very disappointing to me because I thought the world of Les Moss. I thought he was a great teacher. I thought he was a great baseball man. And again, he was the one that, and I've said this a million times, if it wasn't for Les Moss, I don't think I would have ever made it to the major leagues. He was an ex-catcher. He was able to relate to me and help me in so many different ways, not only with my catching, but my hitting and all that. So he basically turned me around. But when Ralph Houck stepped down, Les Moss stepped in to become the manager. He graduated up from AAA, and everybody was excited because a lot of guys on our team actually played for him in the minor leagues. And everybody thought that he was, the same way I thought he was a great manager. But, Sparky became available, and I think Jim Campbell just could not, resist the temptation to sign Sparky. He had obviously a pretty good resume coming from the Big Red Machine and all the things that they had accomplished. So, my initial response was I was very disappointed because I thought they didn't give Les Moss the opportunity he deserved. But then again, we got Sparky Anderson. So, and as time progressed, I learned to really appreciate and love Sparky Anderson. He was a great manager, just a great human being. And it was his job to put together the beginning pieces of that puzzle that eventually became a world champion in '84. So we had, myself, Alan Trammell, Lou Whitaker, Kirk Gibson, Tom Brookins, Jack Morris. I mean, all guys that had come up through our system. And his job was to not only shape and mold us, but, other guys that had come up behind us, and then the people that they added to the ball club. But, the other part of the equation is there's people that have to exit. So his job was to, pick certain people out, and they were on their way elsewhere. There was moves that were made that I, at the time couldn't make heads or tails of why they would do what they did, but obviously they knew a little bit better than I did what was going on and what they were trying to accomplish. So, we traded away guys like Jason Thompson and Steve Kemp, who were both, high draft picks. Steve Kemp was the number one pick in the entire draft, I think in 76 out of USC. And I always thought that he was definitely one of those nucleus guys that we were trying to build around. But, they had pieces of the puzzle that they needed to go out and get. And obviously, if they're going to get them, they had to move other people. So it turned out pretty dang good. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, again, it all leads to 1984, which you write about in the Enchanted season with Tom Gage, out now with from Triumph Books. At the beginning of that season, you guys were on fire. I mean, 35-5 start, and among that was a Jack Morris no-hitter.
Yep.
Take us through that as a catcher during a no-hitter. How many no-hitters had you caught any up until that point?
I had caught a couple in the minor leagues, but I had not caught any at the major league level. You always have guys that get close, but they never quite seal the deal. In fact, in '83, the year before that, Milt Wilcox, who was also a member of that '84 championship team, was 1 out away against the Chicago White Sox, the club that Jack threw his no-hitter against a year later. He was 1 out away from throwing a perfect game.
Wow.
They pinch hit Jerry Hairston, and Jerry Hairston took the first pitch up the middle, line drive up the middle, for the only hit, the only base runner of the game, and then he got the next guy out. So it was like, man. And I never let Milt forget that, because he shook me off on that pitch. So I said, if you had just listened to me, I could have put you in the books. But Jack's no-hitter was very special. He had great stuff that day. But I honestly, and I'm going to say this, I just, even though he had great stuff, he ended up walking 6 guys through the course of the game, which is incredible. And there was one situation in the game where he had bases loaded, nobody out, and was able to get out of that and maintain his no-hitter, maintain his shutout. So it might even have been more difficult in that regard to accomplish what he accomplished. But I thought the umpire was squeezing him. He didn't give him many pitches at all. But, Jack battled through and, kept his composure. And, when it was all said and done, he ended up throwing a no-hitter. So it was, I feel pretty good about when a pitcher does that. I mean, I feel like I have a little piece of what went on. And a funny story was when after we had got done jumping around celebrating on the field, we went up in the clubhouse. And, I continued the celebration into the clubhouse. And while we're doing that, one of the clubhouse kids that works in the clubhouse, visiting clubhouse, came up to me and said, there's a phone call for you in Sparky's office. And I was thinking, well, who would be calling me in Sparky's office? So I went in there and I got on the phone. Hello. And it's Jim Campbell, the president of our ball club, the general manager. And, he's all excited and, just going on and on about what a great game and what a great day and what a great moment, for the Detroit Tigers and blah, blah, blah. And I'm thinking, this is so cool because he's given me credit and given me kudos. And I'm thinking, this never happens. The catcher usually never gets any credit for any of that. It's always, everything goes to the pitcher, and deservedly so. But I thought in this particular moment, what a great thing for this guy to do, to call me and congratulate me and give me kind of a pat on the back verbally for what I had done, So I'm going along with him, and he goes, hey, there's going to be a little something extra for you in your next paycheck because of this. And I'm going, you got to be kidding me. I go, well, thank you very much. So then shortly thereafter, he says, when you struck that last guy out, he goes, I about fell off my chair. And I'm like, when I struck that last guy out, I go, wait a minute. I go, who do you think you're talking to here? And he goes, well, who is this? And I said, well, it's Lance. And he goes, well, I don't want to talk to you. And I go, he goes, I wanted to talk to Jack. And he goes, what are you doing on the phone? I go, well, the clubhouse kid came up and told me that I had a phone call. So I just, jumped on the phone. He goes, well, I don't want to talk to you. He goes, I want to talk to Jack. And I go, I'm thinking, well, here he was being as nice as he could be to me. Now he's ripping on me for being on the phone. So I said, before I got off the phone, I said, well, so about that little something that was going to be in my paycheck, he goes, get off the phone and go get Jack. So I was, at that time, I became a little irritated with the whole deal. So I just put the phone down on the desk and I walked out the door, and I never did get Jack. So I left him hanging on the phone for however long he decided to stay on there. But he and Jack eventually hooked up, and Jack got a little something extra, and, that was all, it was all good. But, that was a fun moment, and it was a great moment for Jack and, obviously the Tigers in general.
Yeah, that was just the 4th game of the year as well. April 7th, 1984. On the road, Comiskey Park, taking on the White Sox. You win 4-0. At what point of the game is it in your mind that something special is happening here. Do you let that into your mind at all?
I honestly don't really take any of that seriously until we roll into like the 7th or 8th inning. I mean, I've caught, I don't know how many games, and a lot of guys have taken no-hitters into the 5th inning, 4th inning, 6th inning, whatever. And it's like, I just take that with a grain of salt. It's like, okay, my main concern is just to stay focused on, having a clean inning and, ultimately winning the game. And okay, so-and-so's, pitching a no-hitter into the 5th inning and in the 6th inning. And I mean, when you get into the 7th inning, it's like, okay, well, hey, this is, it's a reality now. There's a chance. For me, I would say the 7th inning is kind of the point where I start to take notice. Hey, he's got no hitter. I mean, not that you would ever say that to anybody. I mean, it's like, the ultimate baseball curse to, bring it up. But, as we cruised into the 7th inning and beyond, then it became a reality. Now it's like I'm focused on, we're going to try to get this done. So, and Jack knew about it. I mean, as everybody probably recognizes that follows baseball, when a guy's throwing a no-hitter and you get into the later innings, it's like he becomes, a pariah on the bench. Nobody wants to get near him. Nobody wants to talk to him. It's leave him alone. Let him, gather his thoughts. And that's basically what happened. So, Jack's enough of a professional, at least he was at that point, where, he knew what he had to do. And he knew that, the percentages were probably not in his favor, but, he had good stuff and he was still strong and he was still throwing the ball well. So, I always hope that, we can accomplish and seal the deal. But, when it was all said and done, he got it done. So it was a big moment. Yeah.
Again, you mentioned putting this team together, what Sparky Anderson did. Was it World Series or bust for you guys that season?
Well, it became that, yes. I mean, when you start out 35-5, it's like, wow. I mean, the expectations get pretty high. I couldn't even believe it when we got to 35-5. I mean, I remember going back to the hotel that night and going, we've just played 40 games at the major league level and we've won 35 of them. I mean, nobody does that. And I don't think anybody ever will do it again. But I think that put a little bit of extra pressure on us as a team where the expectations, continued to grow. And it was like, if you guys don't win it, after going 35-5, it's going to be like the biggest letdown ever. And to be honest with you, after we had gone 35-5, we went up to Seattle to play a series up there, and they swept us. And the other part of that equation is Toronto was right on our heels. It seemed like the whole time. It's like we could never shake those guys, and they obviously had a really good ball club. So during the middle portion of the season, we maintained our record above 500, but it was a grind. I mean, it was not easy. I mean, we certainly never played at a 35-5 clip, throughout the course of the summer. But it wasn't until the end of the summer, the latter part of the season, that we ended up, picking up the pace and started playing a little bit better baseball and putting a little distance between us and Toronto and everybody else. So, it was, I know, for, as far as Sparky and the coaching staff, their job was to try to keep us focused and motivated and, don't let up. You can't afford to let up. We had a big bullseye on our back every town we went to or every team we played. I mean, they wanted to beat us because we had such a great start. They were out to prove that we weren't all that good, So, it became a bit of a challenge. But the one thing that I always have remembered, and I don't know why I even thought this, but when we played our very first playoff game in Kansas City, I got behind the plate to catch Jack Morris, and before he threw the first pitch in the game, a thought entered my mind that if we don't win at all this is going to be for nothing. The 35-5 start, we were in first place from the beginning of the season to the end of the regular season. If we don't win at all, we'll just be another team that just was a good team but couldn't seal the deal. And so I think that motivated not only me, but everybody else on our ball club that we wanted to be a championship team. And I don't think, anybody was going to be denied, that opportunity. So, we ended up sweeping Kansas City and ended up obviously beating the Padres in the World Series. But the reason I bring that up about you just kind of drift into obscurity if you don't win at all. I had a conversation with Brett Boone. I'm good friends with his dad, and I talked to him not too long ago, and he was on the 2001 Seattle Mariner team that won 116 ball games. I mean, that's amazing in itself. But the deal is they didn't win at all. New York Yankees knocked them off before they ever got a chance to even get into the World Series. So, anything can happen, as everybody says, in a short series. So I think the one thing that I'm most proud of, of all the accomplishments that we had during the course of the season, was that we raised our game to the next level when we got to the postseason and we got it done. So it was a pretty special year.
Again, all part of the Enchanted season, the book out now from Triumph Books. You and Tom Gage co-wrote that. And let's talk about the World Series here. With the Padres, you've got a Tony Gwynn, you've got a Steve Garvey, you've got Goose Gossage, a pitcher on that team. What were your thoughts going up against the Padres and your chances? I mean, eventually you beat them 4-1, but, what were your thoughts going up against them?
Well, you never really know. I mean, they were in the other league, and there was not interleague play at that time. So obviously they won the National League pennant, so it was like they got to be pretty good. They beat the Cubs, who we honestly thought we were going to end up playing the Cubs. This might be kind of a cheap shot, but I thought on paper the Cubs were a better team than the Padres, so it was kind of a shocker that we ended up playing the Padres anyway. But they did beat the Cubs, and they earned their way into the World Series. Guys on that team were guys that we had played against in the American League. Goose Gossage, who was obviously an American leaguer for a long time. Greg Nettles, who was playing third base, was a Yankee forever as well. And even though never really played much against Steve Garvey, I grew up a huge Dodger fan, so I always kept an eye on them and what they were doing. And there was actually a couple guys that I had played with. Champ Summers was a Tiger before he was on that roster with the Padres in the World Series. I ended up playing with Ron Renicky later on in my career, and a couple other guys. So as far as guys just knowing them, I knew a few of them, but we didn't really know what they were all about. All we knew is that, it was another challenge, another hurdle to get over. Just play the same game that we were used to playing the whole year. Be aggressive. We went over our scouting reports, and we took it to them. I thought, I will say that the only thing that I look at in hindsight was Kevin McReynolds. I want to say wasn't he the rookie of the year that year? And he was not on there. He was injured, so he couldn't play. And he was, one of their big offensive guns that year, and he couldn't play in the series because he was injured. So they had to replace him on the roster and had somebody else take his place, in the lineup. But they had some great players. Tony Gwynn was a young player. I mean, he was still a great hitter and he was still a great player, but he wasn't the Tony Gwynn that turned into Tony Gwynn, Superman. They had a pretty solid lineup, but I thought our pitching staff did a great job of handling them and kind of keeping them at bay. Kurt Bavacqua went off on us. So, he had a really good series. But the one thing that really, I think, sticks out in my mind is that we took it to their starting rotation. And their bullpen shut us down. We would always knock their starter out of the game, and they'd bring some guys out of the pen, and we could not hit them. It was unbelievable. And it wasn't until the last game, Game 5, where they finally brought Gossage out of the bullpen, and we jumped on him. But prior to that, their bullpen did one heck of a job shutting our offense down, but we had gotten to their starter early enough to where, it obviously made the difference in the scores.
Yeah, you had a home run against Goose Gossage, 7th inning of Game 5. Is there anything better than hitting a home run in a World Series?
No, no, that was pretty special. It wasn't like I, got a whole lot of hits off of Goose Gossage in my career, so that was pretty special time. Not quite as much fanfare as Gibby's when he hit his off of Goose, but as it turns out, then take the opportunity to point out to a lot of people that that home run that I hit was the the run scoring margin between victory and defeat or whatever. That home run held up as the difference in the score. Gibby's was icing on the cake. It was much more dramatic. I loved it, to be honest with you, because I was standing on deck. I was watching the whole thing play out and listening to all the comments and all that. And then, typical Kirk Gibson went up there in dramatic form and, hit that home run. It was just, I believe when Kirk hit his, it was the moment that everybody thought, okay, we're world champions. There's no way they're coming back from this. So it was it's a pretty fun evening, that Game 5.
Yeah, Kirk Gibson, he's had a couple of big home runs. As a Dodgers fan, I know that as well. So yeah, that's nice to have somebody like him, the luxury of having him. And again, a lot of guys, a lot of talent on that team. But for you, all-star season, 33 home runs at the time, the catcher in the AL. Not only a World Series, but was that kind of the high water mark of your career, statistically and the way you were playing at that time?
Well, it's the most home runs I had ever hit in one season. And I hit, a home run in the playoffs. I hit one in the World Series. So, added to that total a little bit. Back in 82, I had actually, it's the first time I had ever broke the 30 home run barrier. And at that point, I hit 32 home runs that year. And honestly, I didn't even know what that really meant until the end of the season when somebody came up to me and said, "Hey, do you realize that you just set a new home run record for catchers in the American League?" And I go, "I had no idea. I've never read it anywhere. Nobody ever told me." Well, Gus Triandos and Yogi Berra held the record. They were tied for the most home runs up until that point. And they had set the record in 1956, the year that I was born, to be honest with you.
Wow.
So all those years later, in 82, I hit 32 home runs and set a new home run record for the American League for catchers. So I'm thinking, okay, so it was almost 30 years that this record, was intact. So I'm thinking, well, this is a pretty special deal. And then the very next year, Carlton Fisk hit more home runs than me and broke my record. I only got to enjoy it for 1 year, but nevertheless. But I think, all things considered, in 1983, the next year, even though I didn't hit 30 home runs, I think I hit 28. But I probably had my best year production-wise. I mean, I had the only year that I had over 100 RBIs, I had 114 RBIs in 83. I had 28 home runs, and I had 42 doubles, which was pretty good for us, slug like me that couldn't run very well. So, that was just a big year. And I was hoping that 83 would turn into something a little bit more special, but we just never could beat out the Orioles. Obviously Baltimore ended up winning the world championship that year. And even though we ended up, coming in second place behind Baltimore in 83, we actually had a better record against them than they had against us. So we held our own against the Orioles in 83. It's just nobody else could help us out, but, we were able to put it all together the very next year and accomplish what we did in 84.
For you in Detroit, it ended in 86. Free agency took you to Philadelphia, other stops along the way as well. Was it hard to leave Detroit behind? Obviously, you're back involved with the Tigers now.
It was very hard. I envisioned myself being a Detroit Tiger for my entire career, for life, actually. I envy Tram and Lou that got to play together for their entire careers in Detroit. I mean, we all came up basically at the same time. I never wanted to leave Detroit, but it was just the circumstances involved during that time. It was at the height of the collusion era. I think that there was a lot of battles going on that I happened to, get in the middle of. They basically shut down free agency. And I think that enabled, or at least our general manager at the time thought it enabled him to kind of lowball me in contract negotiations because he figured I couldn't go anywhere because they had shut down free agency. I was coming off of a 6-year contract that year. And, if you base salaries by comparison of your peers and, what my numbers were compared to other catchers or guys in my offensive category, I was in line for a pretty significant raise. I played for the same amount of money for the last couple of years at the end of that contract. But, I look at the guy that I actually, was compared to quite often was Gary Carter in the National League. And Gary Carter was making like 3 or 4 times what I was making. So I thought, you know what? I signed this 6-year contract. I'm going to honor it. I'm not going to make any noise about it. And when it's all said and done, if I'm still productive, the Tigers will take care of me, which they almost did. In the spring of 1986, my agent sat down with the Tigers and was negotiating an extension to that contract that was set to expire at the end of the year. And they had come to an agreement, and all it needed was my signature on the contract, and it was a done deal. Well, right before I was able to get my name on that contract, my signature on that contract, they pulled it off the table. And they said, we're no longer offering this contract. We're going to talk to Lance, negotiate with you at the end of the season. And I was like, well, what the heck? What brought that on? Well, to come to find out, it was all part of the whole collusion thing, So I went through the beginning of the season, was having my best year production-wise. I had 21 home runs and 60 RBIs, I think, at the All-Star break.
Wow.
Made the All-Star team. The game was in Houston. I was batting cleanup during the All-Star game. Shortly thereafter, though, and the crazy thing was I was having like sciatic issues almost the entire first half of the season. So I had to deal with that the whole time. And even though I was dealing with that, I was still putting up numbers. Okay. Well, about a week or so after the All-Star game, I just couldn't get out of bed one day. My back locked up and I was a mess. So come to find out, I had a broken pedicle in my lower spine. And they flew me out to Southern California to the Job Curlin Clinic out there to see at the time, my understanding was he was the most renowned back specialist in the country, Dr. Robert Watkins. And he x-rayed my back and told me about this little broken piece and, blah, blah, blah. And I thought, well, for sure he's going to do surgery to repair it. And he goes, look it. And he told me right out of the gate, I can go in and surgically repair this. We can put like a little metal pin in there and put some screws and whatever. And he goes in, and I'm sure it'll heal up and you'll be fine. He goes, the only issue I have is, he goes, with your age and what you do for a living. He goes, and I'm not saying that this would happen. It would be like a 1 in a who knows what percentage of it happening. But if I were to go in there surgically and nick one of the nerves, he goes, your career would be over. And I go, well, at first I was gung-ho about having the surgery because I just wanted to get it fixed. But when he told me that, I was like, well, maybe that's not such a good idea. So what I ended up doing was going through some massive rehab program to strengthen my core and do all that. Well, the only problem with all that went on was that I missed the entire second half of the season. So here I am having my most productive year on the last year of my contract. And lo and behold, I ended up missing the whole second half. But when the season was finally over, I got a clean bill of health from the people at Henry Ford Hospital, where I was going to do all my therapy and rehab. But, then the collusion thing kicked in, and they brought me in to negotiate my contract. And they said, we're going to offer you a 1-year deal for the same amount of money that you made last year. And I go, oh my gosh. I said, well, I'm not doing it. I said, even though I only played a half a year last year, I said, you look at my numbers and everybody else's numbers that caught at the major league level, I've got better numbers in half of a season than most of these catchers did that played an entire season, a full season. And you're not going to give me a $1 raise? I said, I'm not doing it. So, I bowed up and I stood my ground. I didn't want to leave Detroit, and I let them know that. So please don't put me through this and don't make me, well, I'm pretty sure they felt like that because of what the state of the game was, that I wasn't going to go anywhere anyway. But then lo and behold, out of the clouds, here comes the Philadelphia Phillies, and they offered me a deal. So I told them, if anybody offers me anything, I'm leaving, because I number one, I'm very disappointed in your offer. I can't believe you're doing this to me. And that's just the way it is. I don't want to go, but if I have to, I'm going. So the rest is history.
Yeah, time with the Phillies. You finally spent some time with the Angels, the Mariners as well. In the end, 19 years, almost 2,000 games that you played, 1,782 hits, 324 home runs, 1,070 RBIs, 8-time All-Star, 3-time Gold Glove, 6-time Silver Slugger, and a World Series champion. I mean, you put that in perspective. What goes through your mind when you hear those numbers and you get a chance to reflect on your career?
Well, I look back and I think, you know what, I had a pretty good career, and I'm very thankful. When you're coming up through the minor leagues, or, before you ever even get drafted, it's, the thought always goes, am I good enough to play professional baseball? Well, once you get into professional baseball, am I good enough to make it to the major leagues? And then once you get in the major leagues, am I good enough to stay here? So, I overcame a lot of hurdles in my own mind, of what I might be able to do, and if I was good enough to do. So I think what I was able to accomplish in my career was pretty special. I mean, I'm one of those kind of guys that always thinks, I probably could have done a little bit better than I did if I would only done this or I only done that. But I mean, I can't complain about the career I had. I was very fortunate. The home runs and the RBIs and the whole Hall of Fame thing and all that. I wish I would have played a little bit better to get into the Hall of Fame, but I'm satisfied with my career. I mean, I played a long time. A lot of guys don't even get, and I was a world champion.
Yeah.
All I ever think about when it comes to world championships is, I always remember people talking about Ernie Banks, the great Ernie Banks. As great as he was never on a world championship team. So there's a lot of guys that fall into that category. They had great careers, but were never able to be on a world championship team. So I feel pretty fortunate. And even though I played 19 years, I was only in the postseason 1 year, and that was 1984. But we got it done, and we became world champions. So that obviously became a very, very special part of my entire career.
Yeah, it takes those what ifs away when you get that World Series championship. Again, 19 years, as you said, is a long time. After that, some coaching, some managerial stuff. I know right now you're a special assistant to the GM with the Tigers as well. What's life been like outside and after your playing career?
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed coaching and managing. It's just an opportunity for me to give back what I have learned, all the things that I had picked up throughout my career, pass along information that might help somebody achieve their dream, becoming a Major League Baseball player. So to be able to be a manager and be able to call the shots and be able to, give direction to people, and not only give them that opportunity, but alert them to the fact that, hey, when you get into professional baseball, you have a window of opportunity and you need to take advantage of it. There's no shortcuts. There's no, I probably should be working out today, but I'm not going to do it. Or I go home during the off season, I just sit around and do nothing. If your mindset is to get to the major leagues and be a successful Major League Baseball player, you got to be on the job in today's game, 365 days a year almost. And you have to really, get after it, because there's some great athletes out there, and everybody. That's the thing that motivated me when I was in the minor leagues, or actually when I got to the big leagues and I got married and started having kids. It was like, man, I got to do everything I can do to keep my job. I'm not letting one of these guys, sneak up behind me and ace me out of my job. So I went home, I worked out, ran, and did everything that I could do to hopefully make myself a little bit better, every year. I got a little grief about the weightlifting thing from Sparky, but I think in the end I won him over. So, and as you can very well see in the game of baseball today, everybody's got a weight room. Everybody's got strength and conditioning coaches from the minor leagues all the way up to the major leagues. So, I feel kind of like a pioneer in that regard. But, I'm just glad to see that everybody's taking advantage of what that can do for you if done correctly.
The nickname, the Big Wheel. See, now I thought it was, from Tina Turner's Proud Mary, the line in there.
Yeah.
But that's not where it comes from, right?
It's not. Actually, in the early 80s, and I'm going to say that it was prior to 84. I honestly don't remember what year it was, but it was 82, 83, somewhere in there. This Week in Baseball with Mel Allen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That was what everybody watched on TV.
Yep.
It was before ESPN and all the other stuff, right? So we had heard through the grapevine that we were going to be the featured team on This Week in Baseball on Saturday. So we had a Saturday afternoon game, I believe, and we were at the clubhouse. We had just come off the field, and everybody sat around the locker room with our little bitty TV up on one of the lockers. We didn't have any big screens back then, but we knew that we were going to be the featured team, so we all wanted to sit around and watch, to see what they put together for us. So Mel Allen, being the host of that show, started the segment out by saying the wheels of the Motor City are turning, So then they showed some highlight clips of, Tram and Gibby and Chet and Lou and Larry and, whoever doing their thing. And, they showed different highlights of guys and talking about us and all that. And then right towards the end of the segment, Mel Allen jumped in and he goes, and now the big wheel. So I thought, at that time, I must have been exceptionally hot that week, that they would feature me and call me the big wheel. But I mean to tell you, as soon as he said, and now the big wheel, it was like everybody in the clubhouse was like, the big wheel, So from that moment on, I was the big wheel, which, I look at it and go, well, I could be called a lot worse things. So I'll kind of cling to that big wheel thing. So yeah, that stayed with me for the rest of the time.
Tina Turner's Bodyguard and Mel Allen gave you your nickname.
Mel Allen, better than that.
That's pretty good. That's pretty good right there.
That's pretty good.
Again, the book is out now, The Enchanted Season. I know it's over your left shoulder there. You and Tom Gage wrote that. Was it enjoyable to go down memory lane and just again to remember and talk about such a great moment in your life?
Well, the one thing that motivated this project was the fact that this is the 40-year anniversary of our 84 championship team. We're going to have a big get-together down at the stadium at the end of August, so it's nice the Tigers are doing that for us. But, we were approached by Triumph Books to put this project together. They thought that it would be of some interest to, obviously, the Tiger fans around the country and baseball fans in general. But it truly was an amazing season, an enchanted season. Just from this, the standpoint of accomplishments, we talk about the 35-5, the wire-to-wire champions. We won 104 ball games that year, which is still a franchise record. Jack's no-hitter, there's a lot of things that went on during the course of the year that we, document in the book that I think everybody will get a kick of. So, for those that weren't around, I mean, I've made the mistake of asking some people, well, how old were you in 84? And they go, well, I was like a minus, 4 or 5 years old. I wasn't even around. But, a lot of people were around. And all the Tiger fans that followed the Tigers in 84, it was just a very, very special summer. And, people always tell me what they were doing, during the course of the summer and how they followed every game and they can remember this happening and that happening. So it was not only a great opportunity for me to relive all that and try to remember all the different things that went on throughout the course of the year, but I'm sure it'll be fun for a lot of the people that either were around or weren't around to either reminisce or pick up some of these things for the first time as to what really went into the whole process of us becoming world champions. It was a fun year. A lot of crazy things happened. A lot of exciting things happened. And I think everybody will get a kick out of reading about it. And plus, there's a little bit about me, obviously, in my development through high school and minor leagues and whatnot. So we had to throw that in there. But hopefully they'll enjoy that as well.
Well, I was 12 on the plus side back then in 1984. Okay. Just so you know. So it's great to hear the stories here. Great to talk to you. And again, looking forward to getting a chance to see that book as well. The Enchanted Season out now from Triumph Books. Lance, thanks so much. Enjoy your summer and enjoy that reunion you're going to have coming up toward the end of the season.
You bet. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Well, our thanks to Lance for joining us here today, sharing his memories and his journey with us. Great stories, as always, going back to 1984 and that World Series championship for the Tigers 40 years ago here this season. Special thanks to Bill Ames, Scott King, and Triumph Books for helping arrange that sit-down with Lance. And also, we thank you for watching and listening and invite you to like, to subscribe, to share to help us continue to grow our show. For JR Equipment, our creator, producer, and director, I'm Mike Vaccaro. We thank you for watching or listening, and we'll see you next time on another edition of In the Front Row with Mike Vaccaro. Have a great day, everybody.